Well, we're brought up watching fictional accounts and movies of superheroes with extraordinary powers, but now I will watch and comment on a documentary about a real life superhero. Now, he didn't have extraordinary powers unless you count, will and strength and determination as superpowers, and I do. Real life superpowers. So I'm going to, for the first time, watch John Lewis, Good Trouble. I'm going to comment during the documentary, so you'll get my reactions, but you're not going to... This podcast isn't going to be the length of the documentary, unless I'm talking throughout the whole thing, which I doubt. But anytime I see something that I'd like to comment on, I will certainly do that. So I am pressing play now. And you'll hear me talk throughout the documentary. So here we go. It's like all the production companies like CNN and Time Studios. It was all silent, so there wasn't any sound. I thought there was something wrong with my sound. All right, and there's the man. There he is. The late, great John Lewis. And just looking at the introduction and just looking at his face and, and I'm assuming this was recorded not too long before he died, and, just looking at his face and what he's been through, and you can just almost tell. But oh my God, I love that mugshot. And he was arrested, so that mugshot was taken after he was arrested for using a whites-only restroom in 1961, and he tweeted that picture out on his Twitter, obviously, on July 19th, 2015, and he wrote, "Even though I was arrested, I smiled because I was on the right side of history. Find a way to get in the way. Hashtag good trouble." Awesome. And this is before COVID. So people are just walking around as if it's a normal thing to walk around without a mask. And there's Representative Elijah Cummings. He is no longer with us as well. Organize, mobilize, and legislate. That's how things get done. And John Lewis is living proof of that. So I'm guessing that'll be the theme of the documentary, his struggle. Oh wow, I'm watching him watch himself, and he's gonna comment on himself. And Martin Luther King Jr. and black people are online registering to vote, and they're being pushed away by cops. Now they knew this was going to happen, and they knew if they just stood their ground and peacefully resisted, at least the representation in the media will show just the overt brutality of the police, and just the amount of bravery was unreal because they knew the risks. They knew the risk was this, and this is just to vote. Things that some in this, even today in this country, take for granted. But voting is how things are changed. So the more people vote for the more people that they feel could represent them, that's how change is made. So they're marching across the bridge in Selma to vote, and they're being stopped by police under the guise of unlawful assembly. And in the earlier scene when they were online, they were told you don't have a parading permit. So it's any little way to try to justify, an anti-democracy action from these cops. It's got to be terrifying. So you're having troopers advance towards the group with weapons, and they're about to be beat, and they know this, and they know if they fought back, it could be shown as, oh, well, they're fighting back, that's why we had to beat them, even though the cops started it. So now, they're just running, literally running right over them, literally, and that's what they expected, and they still were there, standing, really standing their ground, and here comes the tear gas, and there's gas masks, and there are people being carried away. This is a war. It's a war. It's a war because people want to vote, and the police in the United States of America are stopping them. And John Lewis got bashed in the head And he thought he was going to die. He just said that. And then I'm glad they're flashing forward, because it illustrates the voter suppression that's still going on. It may not be as overt as police standing in the way, but so purging the voting rolls, eliminating the polling places, those are different ways to suppress the vote. So it's not cops standing in front of the door. It's paper pushers and policymakers creating these barriers to stop people to vote. And they just happen to be people of color who can vote in the people they want to vote to create change for people of color. And then, and if that's stopped, change isn't made. So it's the constant struggle and the constant fight. And Lewis said at the beginning of the documentary, there's so much more progress to be made. And he's right. He's right. He was right. My greatest fear is that one day we'll wake up and our democracy is gone. And wow, did that come close to happening? Especially with the events culminating on January 6th, and that former guy, that former president, who had a hand in misinformation, hatred, and cruelty in the years that led up to that insurrection. So he's a hero. He's a hero to so many, based on the things that he's done in order to enact positive change. And that's the comic book. That's the comic book march. And the funny story, oh wow, there's a kid with a Beto shirt. But a funny story with that comic book, he went to a Comic-Con dressed in the way that he dressed during the assault by the police at Selma. And so he was cosplaying himself in order to promote that comic book. And I think that's a great way to promote history, and to promote how to stand up for yourself, and how to promote how to stand up for people like you in order to get change. And it's not even, it's change to be treated just like everybody else is treated. It's equality, but more than equality, it's equity. It's giving the underserved the same advantages as people who are privileged. So he's talking about, during Jim Crow, he said, don't get in the way, don't get involved. And thankfully he did. And it's all these little actions, well, not little actions, but all these actions from, he said, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and those, good, quote unquote, good trouble. That's how change is made. It creates these waves and ripple effects that inspires people, regardless of color, regardless of age, regardless of anything, to do the right thing, to do the least, to promote the least amount of harm possible. And he's talking about his good trouble, all the times he's been arrested, 40 times, and then plus 5 times being in Congress. And I'm probably going to get arrested again for something. So, yeah. Say something, do something. Good trouble. Necessary trouble. Yeah, so 2018 wasn't too long ago, and this country was in big, big trouble of being taken over, even more so by Republicans, by the Trump party. And Republicans are, they're the Trump party, especially now, but even back then. And they were in real danger of, remaining that way. And thankfully, the Democratic Party, the party of John Lewis, took over the House that year and won. The blue wave happened, and the ripples of that blue wave is still being felt today. I believe that's what helped get Biden elected. That's what helped flip the Senate. The House did lose seats for the Democratic Party, but the Democrats have the House as well. The Senate's razor close, and that's complications as well. But, it's actions from people like John Lewis, and as bad as it was in 2018, it was even worse in the Jim Crow era, 50s and 60s, during his coming of age. So to see that change from then to now is astounding. But like he says, there is so much more. There's so much more to do. And he's talking at a church, and you saw the little kids looking at him. They're probably like, what is going on? But hopefully they're at least enthralled of his story about preaching in front of chickens, And now how, he's relating to his fans about picking cotton as young people, and how much work it was, and getting up early, and how much, the cotton with all the dew on it would weigh him down. So it's sharing these common stories to form a connection. And now begins his education when he's in Nashville. His story takes us to Nashville, and where he first is learning the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence, which was most likely a turning point for the rest of his life, and how he was able to foster change. Yep, he just said it inspired him. It changed his life. The right to protest for what is right. And Lawson is framing nonviolent protest not as self-defense, but something militant. It's an offensive position, actually, because that's how change is brought about. It's constant work. And it's breaking down this false sense of superiority. And this was just to desegregate downtown Nashville. So it's starting locally and changing those systems locally in the hopes that it spreads. And he was prepared to put his body on the line, which he did. Oh wow, there he is as a young man. And system, I'm guessing, is going to be a word that they're going to say throughout this documentary, because it's not... changing the mind of one person is great. However, it's more effective to change a system. When the system and the environment changes, that's when the behavior changes. Because trying to change the mind of one person is very admirable, but it takes such a long time, and it's such hard work, and it's quicker and more effective to change systems, laws, and policies to help the most amount of people. And under a constant threat of losing your life or your house, and the ripple effect that has on your family, all of these consequences, whether you're aware of them or not aware, it is a very, very scary thing. Oh wow, and all the training that goes on, and to prepare people for what's to come, and to develop a shield to shield themselves from not only the verbal abuse, but the physical abuse that can happen for people who don't want you to sit in a restaurant. It's just one big temper tantrum from people in power, because it's that fear of them not even losing power, but just being on equal footing with others. So it's high levels of fear for white people, and insecurity from white people. And the first sit-in Nashville, like, oh my God, like their heart just must be racing, and putting pressure on the workers in the restaurant, who have to say, well, it's the management that's doing it. And I'm so curious what the workers are thinking, if they're genuinely racist people, or they're not, and they just have to do it so they don't lose their job. It's, regardless of the reason, it's still wrong. And then, there's the mob just, abusing people who just want to sit and eat. And these optics are powerful because they're not fighting back. They're sitting there and taking it, but that's a militant action. Even though it looks like they're surrendering, they're not. It is an offensive action to promote change. It is a very painful, physically and mentally, a very painful action. These white people aren't being arrested. They're not being arrested for assault. The black people are being arrested because they want to sit down and eat. And eat just like everyone else. A month in jail. A month in jail, and they all chose jail because they want to sit and eat. And sitting and eating is, not being allowed to eat is part of a system. So you got to start breaking into that system to break that system down, and willing to sacrifice freedom, literal freedom, again, because you just want what everybody else wants. And that becomes a powerful statement that inspires people, which obviously it ended up doing. If you don't do everything you can to change things, it'll remain the same. And you got to give it all you have. I'm just repeating what he's saying. Oh, there's AOC. Not too far, maybe like an hour or so away from where I live. I used to work in her district at a bar. Astoria is a really part of her district, I believe, is in Astoria in Queens, and I used to work in Astoria, Queens, New York, baby. And then that's such a great job how it juxtaposes what went on in 2018 to what was going on back then, and how racism changes. So it goes from something being completely overt to, again, these subliminal things, these covert things, to where if you're not in the know, they go, well, what are you talking about? There's it's not like it was. Things are racism's over. Black people and white people can sit. They'll say, oh, back then it was bad, but now it's not bad. What are they complaining about? And when they say they, that's bad enough. But what they're trying to fight against is, again, systemic voter suppression, so things remain the same. And if things remain the same, it's not good. It's not good for a whole lot of people, because their freedom is gone. Their freedom to vote, their freedom to choose who they want to represent them. And it's all these barriers put in place to try and stifle that change. And it's been going on since well before the founding of this country, since slaves were brought over on the ships and people were murdered to register people to vote. So where he's voting, you got to show ID, and where I vote, I don't. I use my signature. So it goes to show how, it's different in each state. Yep, so systematic effort in this state to suppress the vote. Oh, and there's Raphael Warnock, the now Senator of Georgia. And then there's Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. Beto lost. I believe it was close, but he unfortunately still lost. And then it shows the losses: Cruz beating O'Rourke, Kemp winning in Georgia. Those are devastating losses. And however, from those losses can propel people to learn how they lost, and then hopefully improve from that. And I remember in 2018, I was freaking out the whole night. But eventually, the Democrats took control of the House, and they just kept winning and winning and winning and winning. So that was a terrifying night at first, but a good night overall. Very similar to the 2020 election, in where it looked bad at the beginning, but then the Democrats, just based on how the votes were counted, and based on who was counted first, if you just followed it minute by minute, you're like, oh, that's it, Democrats have lost, this is terrible. But then you saw, as the numbers were counted, that they won handedly. Same thing with the 2020 presidential election. Yep, 2018, one party rule was over, and a lot of firsts. Oh, a crowded building. People aren't wearing masks. Oh, wow, that's just weird to see. And there's James Clyburn out of South Carolina, the kingmaker. If not for him, I don't think Biden would have been president. He had the foresight to know that Biden was the person to beat Trump, and what foresight that was. So what the John Lewis Act promotes, it makes it harder to suppress votes, and I believe it's popular with the majority of Americans, and I'm just reading from the New Yorker. It would ban partisan gerrymandering for congressional seats. makes it easier for citizens to register to vote, and to guarantee early voting days. Because when people can vote early, that's more people to vote. More people to vote means that more people have a say in how this country is governed. And the Brennan Center for Justice has identified at least 106 measures in 28 states introduced by Republican lawmakers since the last election, 4 times more than last year, designed to suppress votes by restricting voter access to ballot boxes. That is how they want to try and retain power. They want to try and retain power by cheating. So you use policy to prevent this kind of cheating. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was speaking about how the federal government in the 60s, based on John Lewis's activism, wanted to say, well, slow down, we got to take this slow. But she said, well, why do we have to wait our whole lives? Why do we have to wait our whole lives? It has to happen fast so we can have the same kind of freedom that everybody else has. Now, the federal government's point of view might be like, if we move too quick, we're going to lose the progress that we have. But then the other side is, well, we're still not equal here, and we want this action to happen fast. And by fast, like, it needs to happen yesterday. And now in 2013, through the power of the Supreme Court, removed the power of the Voting Rights Act. So there's what Lewis almost died for. The Supreme Court, really erased a lot of that progress. It's basically like, well, racism doesn't exist anymore, so black people don't need these kind of protections. So they basically allowed, voter suppression to take place, legally. So what happened because of that? Voter ID laws, purging voter rolls in so many places. So it's these actions that cause, less people to vote. So the people who don't want those kind of people to vote remain in power. So surgical precision that Senator Cory Booker was saying. So it's just from a stroke of a pen and from the Supreme Court, it was a big step back. And then depending what state you're in, it could make it so much more hard to vote. And it just goes to show how, you can take 2 big steps forward, and then all of a sudden there's 3 big steps back. And that's why the fight still needs to go on. Yep. So 2016 was the first election in 50 years, and all of these ridiculous wait times, they're products of that, because they figure, well, the longer people have to vote, the more they'll go home. The bigger the chance there is they'll go home. So in 2019, they had a bill to improve voter registration in 2019. Now, the Democrats introduced this knowing full well the Republicans wouldn't pass this. But they wanted to get it out there going, hey, if there is a Democrat who's in power, these are the things we can do. So I'm hoping for President Biden, it's one of the things he does soon. Obviously, there are so many things on his plate because there's so many things going wrong. This, however, voting is democracy. We need voting to have democracy. And those who want to remove the access to voting, want to remove democracy. And they can try to couch that as saying, oh, well, we want to protect things. We want to make sure there's no voter fraud. It's just they're not looking at the evidence. I truly believe there are ulterior motives when it comes to this. Instead of being secure in the way you campaign, instead of that, they try to cheat. And now they try to call people socialists. They try to paint themselves as victims. Meanwhile, they're the ones doing the suppression. They're the ones doing that. But at the same time, they try to frame themselves as being, the true victims of it. So don't believe them. Look at the evidence. They're talking about the freedom singers, and even though they're going through so much pain and so much oppression, it's, the singing promotes solidarity. It's people working together. to sing. I think it promotes solidarity, and then music lifts the spirits. It creates, not only solidarity, but a sense of hope and a sense of happiness, and it makes someone be in that moment, and in that moment there is joy, joy through music, and joy through singing. Even though Lewis said he couldn't carry a tune, I don't think that matters, Representative Lewis. As long as you can sing and dance and experience joy, no matter how good or bad you think your voice is. As long as you do it, or as long as you do something to express that joy and that solidarity to bring about change. So Thurgood Marshall was saying to Lewis, you're endangering yourself. You just need one case. The way Marshall did it. And Lewis's response as a 21-year-old man was, we don't have that now, and we need a mass movement in order to get there. And there's, he just mentioned how Kennedy didn't want the march because he was afraid there was going to be violence, and he didn't want, then they wouldn't have gotten a bill through. But looks like Kennedy was wrong. So it just goes to show the intentions are good. They both want the same thing. It's just trying to figure out the best way to do it. So he's saying we cannot be patient because they're fighting for their lives, and it's in an ideal world, the conservatives and liberals would be fighting for the same goal. It's just that the liberals want to get there fast and conservatives want to get there slower. Problem is now they're not even fighting for the same goals. The conservatives want to remove rights, want to remove democracy. The Republicans want to do this, and the Democrats want to maintain democracy. It's such a low bar, the maintaining of democracy, but it's the struggle of wanting to get there fast, wanting to get there slow, what the results of getting there fast would be versus the results of getting there slow. And it's just constantly trying to figure out where most of the public is at in those regards. I want things to change overnight, and some people don't. And that's why it's important to vote. And it just, and this is showing the lawlessness that was the Trump administration. They were subpoenaed and they refused. They refused because it probably would have exposed them to a lot of wrongdoing. And, because they don't believe in government unless it works for them. Because they don't believe in democracy unless it works for them, they'll just defy orders. And at the same time, they try and preach law and order. So it's the height of hypocrisy, but they don't care that they're hypocrites. They just want to have these sayings, and then these sayings are broadcast all over the place, and a misinformation campaign begins. So there's a system, and there's that word, a system of misinformation that's out there, which is why it's so important to get your news from credible sources. Because misinformation is harmful. It's harmful to someone's health with the pandemic, and it's harmful to democracy itself when people are misinformed, regardless of their intentions. Misinformation can lead to disastrous results. I remember seeing that viral video of him dancing, and through very unhappy moments, it made me happy. And then I also have a video of him saying, it's all going to be all right. It's all going to be all right. And I still turn to that video during moments when I'm sad, because it's going to be all right. You just got to keep going. So there's a picture of him and his late friend Julian Bond in the Mississippi Delta trying to get people registered to vote, and just how dangerous it was. And we take that for granted because, before the pandemic, it's like you set a table out. And even during the pandemic, I knew people who, they would have their masks on, and they would set up a table and register people to vote. And there's an element of risk and danger because of the pandemic. But before the pandemic, a couple of years ago, it's you set up a table and you get people to come in, you register people to vote. You have you can get a printout, and you can fill out the printout, you mail it, and then you register the vote. And the fact that you could have been killed doing that is just, it's astounding. It's astounding. So it's just, I get angry at people who don't vote, even if I understand their reasoning why they don't vote. They don't like either candidate. What's it going to mean for them? I understand it, but that being said, these are rights that people, fought and died for, and to not vote means that you're not really serious about bringing about change, regardless of whether you agree with the system or not. You could contribute to changing that system if you just voted. God damn it. Now his rise into politics. So after being an activist on the, kind of on the outside, and working with the insiders, that's, you become that insider to really make that change. So it was 1980, started after Robert Kennedy was killed. He worked for Carter, and then I believe in 1986 he made his first run for Congress. Oh wow, and tense moments with Bonds regarding the issue of drug testing. And that's how he won the city council. So he's kind of repeating what I said. Being on the outside, he's struggling, and now he's fighting from the inside. Both important fights, and Lewis felt that he could be more effective being on the inside as a member of Congress. And now talking about how he's fighting from within through legislation, through policy, and that's how change is made. It's the outsiders, through protests and activism, spark those changes, and then the insiders, the legislators, write up those laws that was motivated by the people on the outside, and it can become this beautiful circle of change. Action from the outside sparks action from the inside, that spark more action from the outside, and more, and around we go, and hopefully many steps forward than steps back. Challenges the conscience of the Congress, and this, I remember this, about gun control, and I believe this was after Sandy Hook. And they occupied the floor. And so as an act of protest, they sat on the floor. And I remember Fox News didn't cover it. And I remember got an argument with now a former friend who's a Republican, and he's now a member of the Trump cult. Just started arguing. And I kept saying, well, why don't you think Fox News is covering this moment? Because Fox News doesn't want it to, doesn't want this kind of thing out there. Or if they do put it out there, they'll frame it in a way, look what he's doing, he's disgracing Congress. Meanwhile, that's how action's done, through action. There's an element of political theater, but the cause is just. There's Stacey Abrams, a kingmaker in Georgia, and I hope she runs for governor again. But without her, the Democrats wouldn't have the control of the Senate, because I don't think Ossoff and Warnock would be elected. And she's saying the power of Lewis's story needs to be told and needs to be remembered, because our past, isn't that far into the past. And it's remembering these stories and doing the things they did so things don't get bad, or things don't get worse, or steps backward aren't taken. So it's just a constant life. It's a lifetime. It's years of work and struggle to keep this thing going. And by thing, I mean progress, to keep this progress going. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of time. And crossing that bridge in order to, say that they just want to vote. An action that we may take for granted today. They wanted to show the importance of voting, and that suppressing one is suppressing all. And just what resistance they got. What resistance, because systems of government and people don't want to see certain types of people And it's not even about gaining power. It's just about being on equal footing so they can at least compete. And the more people that show up, the harder it is to control. I mean, millions of people, millions, were denied the right. Like a young John Lewis said, wow, Mississippi alone increased registration 800%. That's millions of people who just want to join the democratic process, who just want their voice to be heard, who want to vote people who can, in the closest way represent them. Oh, and that's Lewis holding a Barack Obama book, the official inaugural book, and it just shows, how far we've come with the election of President Obama, but, how far we still need to go as a society. But, that moment was just absolutely, I'm old enough to remember 2008 and just, absolutely historical. I didn't see it as much then, I think, as I can see it now. I think I'm more knowledgeable about history and politics than I was in 2008. So when I look back on it now, it's more powerful than it was when he was elected in 2008. And it was such a difference with me between 2008 and 2012 that, when Obama was reelected, I was like, yes, and then the devastation of 2016, where I was crying at 2:45 in the morning, but to the absolute elation of November 7th, 2020, when the results were in, that Biden won. There's Paul Weyrich of AIPAC, a powerful conservative organization, saying he doesn't want people to vote because he knew, Weyrich's dead, he knew during his life how dangerous it was for Republicans to give people the right to vote, because the more people who vote, the less of a chance Republicans have to win. And now it's seeing with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act how the ID law, not since Reconstruction, that's post-Civil War stuff. What a vicious step back. And like I said, I'm hoping the filibuster is removed so things can be more fair and the Voting Rights Act can be re-strengthened in the name of John Lewis. And like Eric Holder says, a former Attorney General, we have to re-engage. This is not a time for despair. To quote Bernie Sanders, despair is not an option. So I think of that when I'm in states of despair about the state of this country. It's what does despair do? What does it do for us? It just brings us down. So we want moments to lift us up. And it's, like I said, an ongoing struggle. And it will continue to be. And I say continue to be, even though I don't want it to continue to be, it just seems to it's just the way it is. There's always a struggle and a fight. Always. I hope for the day it's not, but I don't see that happening. It'd be nice. It'd be really nice. In 2019, walking across the bridge, Trump was not there, not surprisingly. So I'm saying there's going to be some setbacks, some delays, but he believes we'll get there. And, I believe it too. Damn it, you have to. But, believing is one thing. It's working for it is another. So believing is cool, but to believe, you got to work. So you see John Lewis winning the Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama, and Donald Trump just disgraced the Medal of Freedom with people like Rush Limbaugh. Just giving him is just tarnishing what the Medal of Freedom actually stands for. It's gross. So we're looking at the credits now. So I don't know if there's any post-credit things. Let's hope there's not. I'm not a fan of post-credits, but it gave a good overview, brief overview. But how can you encapsulate a life like John Lewis in an hour and 40 minutes? You can't. But for people who don't know about John Lewis, I think this is a good start. It gave a good overview. It described the turning points of his life, from child to his death, and the things that he's done, and hopefully the legacy that he leaves moving forward. So yeah, it's a really good overview, and I'm sure there's plenty of books and websites and articles all about him that if people want to go into further detail of the things that he's done, it's there. You go once it's safe to go to museums, you can go to a museum and read all about it. But he is a legend in the name of civil rights and the advancement of progress in American society. So thank you, John Lewis. Thank you, Magnolia Pictures, for making this documentary. And hopefully it's just one way that, oh, God damn it. I knew there was post-credits. Yeah, it's just him saying, not just, but it's him saying, be happy. They must have heard me complain about the post-credits. Regardless of the post-credits, so hopefully this can inspire people. John Lewis definitely inspires me. If I do a 10th of what he's done, I think I will have lived a fulfilled life. So I will certainly do all I can to promote the values that he promotes. And it's just something as simple as equality, and not just equality, but better than equality, equity, where equality is, people getting the same thing. Equity is the underserved possibly getting more so they can have the same as those who are privileged. So onward to equity, onward to progress. And thank you, John Lewis. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this podcast. So if you want to hear more podcasts, you can rate, share, and review so other people know about it. And you can find me on Twitter at MMAM Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at MMAM Podcast. You can email me at MMAMpodcast@gmail.com. And we're still in a pandemic, so please educate yourself using credible sources like the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, BBC, NPR. Listen to the news, listen to the science. Keep yourself and others safe through all this. And when this pandemic is over, and I say when because it will be, information and knowledge, it's powerful now and it's going to be powerful in the future. So use that for things that are so important so we can keep this train rolling and keep this thing called progress going. All right. Take care, everyone. Take care of each other. All right. Good trouble. And good trouble. All right.